Good morning, students. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about instruments of trade policies. You can say what are the various measures that government take as a trade barrier or to promote our export or import through the foreign trade policies. Basically, these trade barriers are divided into two parts: tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. Tariff barriers are like specific duties, ad valorem duty, compound duty. Non-tariff barriers are like ban on import, import licensing, quota, voluntary export restraint, exchange control, fiscal barrier, administrative and technical regulations. Now we are going to cover one by one. Like your tariff barrier. Basically, tariff barrier means you are imposing taxes, you are imposing duties on import and export to control the export or import. We have a specific duty. Specific duty means when a specified amount of tariff charged per unit of your duty, like rupees 100 per ton of cement, then it is called a specific duty. Ad valorem duty when we are charging the taxes in the form of percentage, like 10% of the value of cement. Then compound duty when we charge both specific and ad valorem duty, like rupees 100 per ton plus 10% on the value of the cement imported. So it is called compound duty. These are the tariff barriers that we are imposing on our import and export. Then there are non-tariff barriers. Generally, these non-tariff barriers are generally governments are using this non-tariff barrier more as compared to tariff barriers, because non-tariff barriers sometimes create a friendly relation. It will not going to uh, break your political relations, like ban on import. ओके आपने जो है कुछ सेलेक्टिव आइटम्स हैं जिस अपनी डोमेस्टिक इंडस्ट्री को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए आपने सीधे सीधे बैन कर दिया, ठीक है, बट दिस इज़ पॉलिटिकली सेंसिटिव if you are taking such type of decision. Then import licensing, that India use it. In this, we use to control the total volume of import, and export of certain product may also be regulated through licensing. Without licensing, you cannot import that particular good. Then quotas. In quotas, we have a quantitative restrictions. Means certain amount of goods only you can import or you can export in quota system, and it is used to protect the domestic producer, or you can say to uh, save our country foreign exchange resources. Excuse me, or to protect the interest of the domestic consumers also, uh, specifically in our resources which are scarce. To protect the interest of the domestic consumers, you can say the goods which are already scarce in our country, and if they are exported, it create problem. So to protect that also, we use quotas. Sometimes export and import quotas are fixed due to international commodity agreements also. Generally, quotas is considered worse than tariffs. हमें जो है कोटास जो होता है इतना अच्छा नहीं लगता एज कम्पेयर टू टैरिफ, बिकॉज नो कंपटीशन ऑन प्राइस. इन केस ऑफ कोटा देर इज नो कंपटीशन related to price, and it is also not generate any revenue as in case of tariff. ग्रेट, ठीक है, अगर आपको कंट्रोल करना है तो आप टैरिफ बढ़ा दीजिए. जिसको बहुत ज़रूरत है एटलीस्ट दे कैन गेट इट विद द बाय पेइंग हायर टैरिफ, बट इन कोटास इट इज़ रिस्ट्रिक्टेड. एक पर्टिकुलर वॉल्यूम के बाद आप उसे ये ले ही नहीं सकते इनकेस आपको ज़रूरत है तो भी, एंड इससे हमें कोई इनकम भी जनरेट नहीं हो रही है इन द फॉर्म ऑफ टैरिफ, ठीक है. देन कोटा सिस्टम इज़ मच मोर डिफ़िकल्ट देन दैट ऑफ द टैरिफ सिस्टम. it is much more difficult also. Then we have a voluntary export restraint, and in this it is a bilateral agreement, you can say, between two countries or two government, under which exporting country voluntarily agree to restrict the export of the specific commodity to a importing country at a specific level. In 1980s, Japan agreed to restrict their export of automobile to US to 185 million vehicle per year only, and it is adopted under the pressure of importing country. But it is good as compared to quota because it is easier to lift, and it does not spoil your political relations also. That's why it is considered good. And then exchange control. In exchange control, the restriction was there. Government restrict the supply of your foreign currency to the importer. So exchange interventions help say they can control the import. Then we have a fiscal barriers also to protect the domestic industry from unduly cheaper import, like anti-dumping duties, countervailing duties are imposed by the government to save that. Then we have administrative and technical regulations also. Under administrative and technical regulation, which is very much used by the government. In administrative regulation, they make a importing, you can say, a frustrating experience. Thereby, they restrict the import, and they create a frustrating experience by filing a long and complicated form, or delay or a red tape in a customer clearance, elaborate and expensive import licensing procedure, you can say, complicated procedure for obtaining permit, and long delay in the clearance of document, concentration of all the import at one particular port to create a congestion, etc. These measures and procedure involve delay, cost, and uncertainty, which hampering the import. Okay, means आप क्या कर रहे हैं, आप मना नहीं कर रहे, कुछ नहीं कर रहे, but you are making a procedure very complicated, very delay, that discourage the importer to import. Then technical regulations are there. In technical regulation, it means health and safety regulation, sanitary regulation, package labeling requirements are there. Packaging and labeling requirements, industrial standards are there. All these increase the cost of foreign export, and condition that the product will be tested, certified only in the importing countries is very cumbersome, expensive for the exporters. So, these are the restriction, technical regulations that they are using. Government generally prescribe usually very high standard to discourage the import. Then another measures is there in a local content requirement. In this, it is specified that the prescribed portion of the final product will produce in the importing country. Okay, will be produced in the importing country, and it provide protection to the domestic industries, and it raise the cost to the exporters also. So, in a local content requirement will also help to restrict the import, because it force us कि हमें अपने local content को भी उसमें include करना है. Then among the non-tariff measures, technical barrier are the most persuasive, you can say, effective, about it affecting about 20% of the product line and 60% of the world trade. Other types of measures are applicable to around 20% of the world trade. So you see, in a non-tariff measure, technical barriers are generally used more to control our import. And now we are talking about free trade and protection. Free trade means there is absence of restriction on any type of restriction in import and export. Free trade it lead to specialization, variety of goods at lower price you will get. It help to check inflation also, and it break a monopoly of the domestic manufacturers. You can say economy of scale we can generate, but we use protection sometimes. Protection means you are using a you are not allow export import freely. You are imposing tax, tariff. ठीक है, you are in, to control the import and export. The basic objective of protection is to protect the domestic industries, to encourage or you can say to conserve your country's foreign exchange resources, or to achieve the favorable balance of payment, to encourage research and development, or to discriminate against the unfriendly nation. Okay, so these are generally for all these things to protect our basically our domestic industries and all. We using these tariff and non-tariff barriers, and there are some arguments against the protection also, like domestic producer less quality conscious, क्योंकि वो अपनी क्वालिटी को लेके ज़्यादा कॉन्शियस नहीं होते. दे डिस्करेज इंट्रैक्शन एंड सर्वाइवल ऑफ इनएफिशिएंट फर्म्स. डोमेस्टिक मोनोपोली हमारी हो जाती है. और टू रिड्यूस द वॉल्यूम ऑफ international trade and inefficient utilization of resources. So all these also provoke us to use the protection foreign and all. So this is all about ki at what time we use free trade and at what time we have to use the restrictions in our import and export. Both have a favorable and non-favorable point. And free trade, various institutions, international institutions are there which promote a free trade, but still government use some protection to have to protect their domestic firms, to protect their foreign resources, natural resources, etc. Okay, students, in next class we are going to talk about our MNCs, what are MNCs and all. Thank you, students.